Washington state just passed $9.4 billion in new taxes targeting the wealthy. 2 years later, they're facing a $4.3 billion deficit and emergency spending cuts. The money didn't disappear, it moved. And it's not coming back. This is the story of the fastest wealth exodus in American state history, a fiscal experiment that backfired in real time, and the hidden mechanism that turned record tax revenue into record budget crisis. What happened in Olympia is now being studied by economists and lawmakers nationwide as a case study in policy failure. For decades, Washington was a tax haven for high earners. No state income tax. No capital gains tax. Tech executives, entrepreneurs, and investors flocked to Seattle and Bellevue, building the backbone of the Pacific Northwest economy. Amazon, Microsoft, Starbucks, these weren't just companies, they were wealth generators that made Washington one of the richest states per capita in America. The fiscal model was simple: attract high earners, let them build businesses, tax consumption and property, and watch revenue grow. It worked for 50 years. Then the model changed. And nobody modeled what would happen when it did. The numbers tell the story. Between 2021 and 2024, Washington implemented the largest tax increase in state history, a 7% capital gains tax on investment profits, the first of its kind in state history, and a 9.9% payroll tax on income above $250,000. Combined with existing federal taxes, high earners in Washington now face total marginal rates exceeding 50%. The projection was clear: these taxes would generate billions in new revenue for schools, infrastructure, and social programs. The reality? Revenue fell short. Way short. And the gap kept widening. This is where the paradox begins. The capital gains tax alone was supposed to be a fiscal game changer. Implemented in January 2022, it targeted individuals with annual investment gains exceeding $250,000. The tax applied to stocks, bonds, and business sales, the very assets that made Washington's wealthy class wealthy. Proponents argued it would generate over $500 million annually, funding education and childcare. But the tax had a feature opponents warned about from day one: it only applied to Washington residents. Sell your business while living in Seattle. 7% to Olympia. Sell the same business after moving to Idaho or Texas. 0. The incentive was binary and the stakes were enormous. Then came the second wave. In 2023, Washington introduced the so-called millionaire tax, a 9.9% payroll tax on income above $250,000 for individuals and $500,000 for joint filers. This wasn't a capital gains tax on one-time asset sales, this was ongoing, annual taxation of high salaries. For a tech executive making $800,000, the new state tax burden was over $54,000 per year. For a dual-income household of 2 software engineers each making $300,000, the hit was over $99,000 annually. And unlike capital gains, you couldn't time this. It was automatic, unavoidable, and permanent unless you changed your state of residence. The timing couldn't have been worse, or from another perspective, more perfectly clarifying. These taxes landed in an era of maximum workforce mobility. Remote work had become normalized during the pandemic. Tech companies had decentralized. Geography no longer determined career access. And critically, neighboring Idaho, Montana, and distant Texas and Florida had all launched aggressive campaigns to recruit Washington businesses and residents. The pitch was simple: same job, same salary, 0 state income tax, lower cost of living. For someone making 7 figures, The math was a six-figure annual difference. For business owners planning an exit, it was the difference of 7% of their entire life's work. The exodus began quietly, then accelerated. High-net-worth individuals started establishing Idaho residencies, spending the required 183 days per year in Boise or Coeur d'Alene to break Washington tax domicile. Business owners timed asset sales to occur after relocation. Tech executives negotiated remote work arrangements and moved to Austin or Miami. The Washington Department of Revenue started noticing the pattern in late 2022. Projected capital gains tax revenue was missing targets. By 2023, the gap was undeniable. The wealthy weren't evading the tax through shelters or loopholes, they were simply leaving. And once the trend became visible, it became self-reinforcing. Every exit validated the next person's decision. The data became impossible to ignore. A 2023 survey by the Association of Washington Business found 24% of employers were actively considering relocating out of state, and 55% of business leaders were exploring the option. Not thinking about it, exploring it. Accountants, attorneys, and relocation consultants reported unprecedented demand. Washington had always seen some outmigration, but this was different in scale and speed. These weren't retirees downsizing to Sunbelt states. These were peak earning years professionals and business owners in their most productive decades. The tax base wasn't eroding, it was fracturing. And the state was still assuming revenue growth based on 2021 economic models. Then the corporate dominoes started falling. In 2023, Starbucks, headquartered in Seattle since 1971, announced it was relocating multiple senior corporate roles and support functions to offices in other states, including Texas. The company cited operational flexibility, but the tax implications were transparent. Other major employers followed similar paths, not full headquarter relocations that would generate headlines, but strategic role shifts, remote work approvals for high-paid executives, and new hiring focused outside Washington. Amazon continued expanding its Virginia and Texas operations. Microsoft accelerated out-of-state hubs. The exodus wasn't dramatic, it was methodical, calculated, and accelerating. Follow the money and the pattern becomes stark. Idaho real estate markets near the Washington border exploded. Coeur d'Alene, once a quiet resort town, saw luxury home sales surge 40% in 2023, driven almost entirely by Washington transplants. Boise became a magnet for tech workers and entrepreneurs. Texas gained over 87,000 net domestic migrants in 2023, with Washington as one of the top origin states. Florida pulled similar numbers. These weren't random moves, they were tax-optimized relocations by people who could do the math. Every U-Haul heading south was carrying future tax revenue that Olympia had already spent in budget projections. The fiscal model was collapsing in real time. The irony is brutal. The capital gains tax generated roughly $446 million in its first full year, below the $500 million projection. But that shortfall doesn't capture the real cost. Every high earner who relocated to avoid the 7% capital gains tax also took their future income tax. Wait, Washington doesn't have income tax. Except now it does, for high earners. So they also removed themselves from the 9.9% payroll tax base. And their property tax. And their sales tax. And their business-generated jobs and secondary economic activity. The state didn't just lose 7% of one transaction, it lost decades of future revenue from individuals who would have stayed under the old model. Business coalitions sounded the alarm early and were ignored. The Washington Policy Center warned in 2021 that the capital gains tax would trigger capital flight. The Association of Washington Business testified that the combined tax burden would push the state past a tipping point. Independent economists noted that Washington's competitive advantage was its tax structure, and eliminating it would remove the primary reason high earners tolerated the state's high cost of living. The response from proponents was consistent: the wealthy won't leave, they have ties here, their businesses are here, and besides, we need the revenue. The assumption was that wealth was geographically sticky. It wasn't. And the cost of that miscalculation is now $4.3 billion and growing. Now the fiscal chickens have come home to roost. Despite a strong stock market and solid national economic growth, Washington faces a $4.3 billion budget shortfall for the current biennium. Governor Inslee has proposed emergency spending cuts across state agencies. Programs that were supposed to be funded by the new tax revenue are now on the chopping block. The mechanism is clear: the state assumed static behavior from a mobile tax base, designed revenue projections around that assumption, allocated spending against those projections, and then watched the tax base dissolve faster than the spending could be cut. This is the fiscal death spiral opponents warned about. Each tax increase triggers exits, which creates shortfalls, which prompts calls for more taxes, which triggers more exits. The question now is whether the trend can be reversed or if it's too late. Some lawmakers are proposing adjustments, exempting business sales under certain thresholds, or creating credits for long-term residents. But the policy change that would actually stem the exodus, repealing the taxes, is politically untenable because the state has already spent the projected revenue and is now dependent on it despite the shortfalls. Others argue for doubling down: if the wealthy leave, tax them harder on their way out or expand the tax base downward. But every proposal to intensify taxation only validates the exit decision for those still considering it. The state is trapped in a prisoner's dilemma of its own creation. Meanwhile, the exodus continues. As of early 2024, the outflow has not slowed, it's accelerating. More business owners are timing their exits. More tech workers are negotiating remote arrangements and switching driver's licenses. Idaho, Texas, and Florida economic development agencies are running targeted digital ads in Seattle and Bellevue zip codes. The network effects are kicking in. Every person who leaves makes it easier for the next person to justify the decision because they now have a social and professional network in the destination state. The empty office space in downtown Seattle and Bellevue is the visible scar tissue of a policy experiment that fundamentally misread how mobile wealth actually is in 2024. This is not a closed case study, this is an ongoing economic experiment with national implications. Other high-tax states are watching Washington closely. California, New York, and New Jersey face similar pressures and similar temptations to increase taxes on high earners. The question is whether Washington's experience serves as a warning or whether each state believes they are different and immune to capital flight. For individuals and businesses still in Washington, the calculus is intensely personal: stay and hope the policy reverses, or leave while the window is still open. The data suggests many have already decided. The money moved. And right now, there's no clear path to bring it back. The experiment continues.